Imagine this. You are the king. Beneath your throne, two women are screaming, clawing at each other over the single, crying infant at your feet, both claiming him as their own. The stifling air of the court is thick with their cries, their sweat, the scent of their desperation. The old men at your side, the generals who fought and bled for your father their entire lives, now furrow their brows, helpless. They know how to conquer a city, but not how to dissect a human heart. But you do. As chaos engulfs everyone else, you feel a strange calm. Within their raw, primal, emotional storm, you see a path, clear and straight, paved with pure logic. And so you hear your own voice, like a shard of ice, cutting through the noise. Bring me a sword. You watch the guard step forward, his blade gleaming. You watch the infant fall silent, as if sensing the sudden terror in the air. And you watch the flicker of cruel satisfaction in the false mother's eyes. In that instant, just before you deliver your final judgment, you feel it, the thrill of seeing into a human soul, the cold, clinical power of wielding your wisdom. You won. That day, the entire nation sang your name. You had tamed chaos with reason. But that night, as you stood alone on a palace balcony, savoring the day's victory, a question, like a ghost, knocked on the door of your heart for the first time. You saw into that woman's soul with such ease, but in the years to come would you be able to see into your own? This is a long and heavy story. It is your story. If you have the courage to follow my voice, to walk the path of your life once more, to re-examine the choices you once believed were so right, then your listening will be your own final judgment. To understand the choices you made later, we must first return to the beginning, back to the world of your father, King David, a world wild and untamed, a world like a tempest, the world you spent a lifetime trying to escape. Do you remember? Your father's palace was always full of sound, the rough songs of drunken soldiers, the lyres of his poets, the laughter of women, the hushed whispers of conspirators. It was always full of smells, roast meat, wine, sweat, and blood. Your father was not a man, he was a force of nature. A figure later philosophers would describe as Dionysian, the embodiment of passion, desire, art, violence, chaos, and life itself. He could dance before his god until his clothes fell off, and in a fit of rage, decide the fate of a war overnight. He was the heart of the storm. You grew up in this storm. You feared him, even worshipped him. But you also saw the other side of this power. You saw how his own passions consumed his palace in his final years. You saw your half-brother Absalom, as handsome and charismatic as your father, lead a rebellion that forced the great king to flee barefoot over the mountains. You saw, as he lay on his deathbed, your other brother Adonijah anoint himself king. You saw the once indomitable kingdom, in its Dionysian chaos, teetering on the brink of collapse. And then, it was your turn. With the help of your mother Bathsheba, you launched a swift, precise, and ruthless purge of the court. Your brother was put to death. Your father's fiercest and most unruly general, Joab, was put to death. Every potential threat, without exception, was eliminated. I saw it. Your hand did not tremble as you signed the death warrants. Because you knew you had to. This wasn't just about power. It was a spiritual patricide. You weren't just killing men. You were killing your father's way of ruling by passion and instinct. You were drawing a line under his fervent, chaotic era with cold, hard reason. It was then, after you had swept the board clean, that you went to Gibeon to offer a sacrifice, and in the night, the famous dream came to you. God asked you, "What do you want?" All the treasures of the universe were laid before you. You could have asked for your father's invincibility in battle, for endless wealth, for a life of unparalleled length. But you didn't. You said to the voice, "Give me a wise and discerning heart, to govern your people, and to distinguish between right and wrong. You made your choice. That night, you officially declared war on your father's Dionysian world. You chose Apollo, the god of reason, order, logic, and radiant form. You chose the light, the clean boundary, the perfect shape. You chose to rule this world with your mind, not with your heartbeat. It was the choice of a genius, a noble choice. But it was also a choice made in the quiet of a dream, before you had truly tasted power, before you understood the depths of human nature. A choice for which you would spend the next 40 years, with your entire kingdom and your very soul, paying the bill. And so, you began. You took that word you chose in the dream, wisdom, and forged it from an abstract concept into stone, cedar, and pure gold. You began to measure, plan, and build your world anew with your clear, cold reason, a reason that shone like the sun, reaching everywhere. At first, everyone cheered for you. The world your father left behind, though full of life, was also full of scars. You brought peace, stability, and unprecedented prosperity. You replaced war with diplomacy, plunder with trade. Silver in your palace became as common as stones. The spices in your kingdom were as fragrant as legends from the Garden of Eden. But all of this was merely a prelude to your master plan. Your true masterpiece was the temple you built for your God and for the orderly heart of your own mind. Do you remember those 7 long years? You turned the entire nation into a precision machine, humming for a single purpose. The forests of Lebanon gave you their finest cedar. The mines of the south yielded their purest gold. But the most astonishing thing was the order you gave. On the construction site of the temple, no sound of a hammer, axe, or any iron tool was to be heard. A silent construction site. I remember everyone thought you were mad, but you calmly explained that the structure had to appear perfectly, as if it had grown from the earth itself. And so, every stone was cut and polished to perfection at the distant quarry. Every timber was crafted with perfect joints in the forest. Then, these perfect components were brought to Jerusalem in silence and assembled flawlessly by workers moving as if in a solemn ballet. Every day, you would go to inspect the work. You would look at the absolutely straight lines, the seams precise to the millimeter, the harmonious symmetrical colonnades, and you would feel a creator's satisfaction. This was not your father's epic poem, improvised in the heat of passion and blood. This was your symphony of architecture, composed with mathematics, geometry, and pure reason, dedicated to God. When the temple was finally completed, covered inside and out with pure gold, gleaming under the sun, you stood on the opposite hill and looked at it. You knew you had done it. You had announced the dawn of your Apollonian age with a perfect, rational, and radiant structure. The entire world was drawn to your light. And then, she came, the Queen of Sheba, from a distant southern land, bearing spices, gold, and riddles. She came not to submit, but to challenge. She had to see for herself if your legendary wisdom was real. I remember that afternoon. She walked into your great hall, and the entire court fell silent. After the diplomatic pleasantries, she smiled and began her test. She had her servants bring forward 2 vases of flowers. One was real, the other a breathtakingly realistic imitation of wax and silk. To the eye, they were identical. She said to you, "Great king, tell me which of these has life, before my servant takes 10 paces." Your advisors murmured among themselves. No one could tell. It was a problem the eye could not solve. But you only smiled, as if you expected it. You did not rise. You did not even look closely at the flowers. You simply said to a nearby attendant, in an almost languid tone, "Open the west window." The attendant obeyed. The afternoon breeze and the sunlight streamed in. Soon a few bees, drawn by the scent of the gardens, buzzed into your hall of gold and ivory. They circled for a moment, and then, without hesitation, They landed on one of the vases. You pointed to the vase with the bees. That one, you said to the queen, is alive, for life will always draw life. You won. You had cracked an ingenious deception with the simple logic of nature. You savored the look on the queen's face, a mixture of astonishment and admiration. In that moment, you felt you were the embodiment of reason itself. All the world's mysteries, in your presence, would dissipate like morning mist. You felt that your perfect world, ruled by order, was indestructible. But was it? As you stood at the pinnacle of that golden cage of perfect order, looking down upon all you had created, did you not feel a certain chill? To build that perfect temple, you needed tens of thousands of laborers. In the grand, rational blueprint of your kingdom, they were a resource you had to manage. And so, you decreed a national levy of forced labor. For a generation, tens of thousands of your people were compelled to leave their fields and their families each year to cut timber and quarry stone for you. In your mind, it was a necessary sacrifice. For a greater, divine purpose, the will and happiness of the individual could be temporarily set aside. Within the precision machinery of your state, they were no longer living men, no longer individuals with their own joys, dreams, and pains. They became numbers to be calculated and expended, silent, faceless components in your grand design. Your father's kingdom, though chaotic, was full of vibrant individual faces. In your kingdom, faces were blurring, leaving only numbers and functions. And your 1,000 wives and concubines, they were the ultimate expression of this murder of passion by reason. Your father David collected wives out of passion and desire. It was Dionysian, chaotic, and brimming with life. You, however, collected wives as if playing a meticulous game of chess. I remember most clearly the day you married Pharaoh's daughter. That wedding was the grandest and coldest ceremony I have ever witnessed. The procession stretched for miles. It took me 3 days just to copy the list of her dowry. But on your face, and on the face of the beautiful Egyptian princess, I saw not a single trace of the joy or shyness of a newlywed couple. It was a transaction, a business contract between two nations, sealed with a living person. Marriage, the most irrational, passionate, and chaotic of human bonds, had become, in your kingdom, a precisely calculated geopolitical spreadsheet. You used this method to buy 40 years of peace for your people, and that was your great achievement as a king. But your perfect order was quietly charging you a fee. The first fee was the freedom of your people. The second was your own humanity. You believed you had completely tamed chaos with order. But you didn't know that you weren't taming it. You were only suppressing it. You suppressed it from the hearts of your people. You suppressed it from your own marriage bed. And all that is suppressed will eventually return. You thought you had banished the Dionysian for good, but it was there, in the deep places of your kingdom, in the places you refused to look, waiting for its moment to return. And the one who would open the door for it was you. You thought you were in control of everything. You thought you could forever play the perfect balancer, neatly dividing the world into two parts. Over here, your pure, orderly Apollonian temple, belonging to God and reason. And over there, your calculated chessboard of imperial interests. You believed the two could exist in parallel, never touching. But the pieces on the board began to move on their own. Those foreign princesses you married as political contracts, they gradually put down roots in your court. They were no longer silent symbols. They were powerful political entities, the crucial nodes that held your empire of peace and trade together. They began to make demands. At first, it was private requests. They wanted to offer small sacrifices to their ancestral gods in their own chambers. You, as a rational monarch, saw this as an understandable cultural difference. You allowed it. A harmless concession, was it not? But once a crack in the dam is opened, it only ever gets wider. Gradually, their demands became public and official. They were princesses. Their gods, they argued, also required public places of worship befitting their status. This was not a religious request, it was a political one. To refuse meant to tear up treaties, to risk war on your borders, to see the system of peaceful trade you had spent 20 years building collapse overnight. And so, the ultimate question, the one you had always tried to avoid, was placed sharply before your royal council. Do you remember that afternoon? Your council chamber was utterly silent. All your advisors, all your wise men, stared at the floor, because everyone knew this was an impossible problem. Deep in your heart, the God of your father, the first and most absolute commandment, etched in stone, "You shall have no other gods before me," was thundering a warning. This was the foundation of your kingdom, the entire reason your perfect temple existed. But at the same time, your own mind, the diamond-clear reason you had prayed for from God, was calmly analyzing the situation. To maintain the peace and stability of the entire empire, your highest interest, you had to tolerate, even respect, the beliefs of these allies. It was the only correct choice for a statesman to make. For the first time, your faith and your wisdom stood in absolute opposition. Your perfect Apollonian system had produced, for the first time, a fatal logical paradox. You felt a tearing sensation you had never known before. Your father, David, spent his life fighting external enemies. But you, at this moment, had to fight yourself. Your once omnipotent reason, which could see through everything, had now become a cage where two parts of you fought to the death. Finally, you made a decision. You, Solomon, the wisest man in the world, made the most logical, pragmatic, and politically astute decision of your reign. You agreed. You gave the order for altars to be built for the most important of your foreign wives' gods on the hill facing Jerusalem. An altar for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab who demanded human sacrifice, and for Molech, the heinous god of the Ammonites. I remember when you gave that order. Your voice was as calm and devoid of emotion as it had been on the day you ordered the infant to be split in two. You thought you had found a solution. You thought you had used a larger, more inclusive reason to solve this difficult political problem. You thought you could draw a safe boundary for chaos on the hills of your holy city, build a small cage for it, keep it under your control, and make it serve the vast machinery of your empire. You thought, once again, you had tamed chaos with order. But you were wrong. When you gave the order for the first stone to be laid for a god other than the God of your father, you were not building a cage. You were deep in the foundations of the perfect, impregnable castle of reason you had built, lighting the fuse of a bomb with your own hand. You had opened the door a crack, thinking you could control the wind that blew in. But your father's life should have taught you. Chaos, like the wind, is something you can never control. It will only blow in, and then it will extinguish all your lights. You thought you could keep order and chaos separate. But like dropping a single drop of ink into a bowl of clear water, eventually the entire bowl turns dark. The crack you opened with your own hand soon became a vast, unhealable wound. At first, it was only the foreign princesses sacrificing at their own altars. But gradually, that primal, untamed Dionysian spirit began to creep down from the hill you had allotted it, like a vine, winding its way around your holy city and around you. Your people, who had been suppressed for so long by your strict laws and rigid order, began to be drawn to those exotic rituals, full of mystery and sensory excitement. Your perfect, rationally governed Apollonian world encountered, for the first time, a longing it could not explain and could not satisfy. And you began to fall. You started to attend their ceremonies. Perhaps at first it was merely a political courtesy, but gradually, the heart that was once as pure as a diamond, believing in a single truth, began to grow cloudy and divided. You, the man who built the temple for God, Your knees began to bow to idols of wood and stone. You thought you were still in control, but you forgot that your father David was so powerful his entire life because his faith was whole. It was singular. Even when he sinned, he knew who he was betraying. But you, in order to maintain a rational, inclusive, and diverse empire, had turned your own faith into a ledger that could be amended at any time. And when your faith became negotiable, your power vanished. And so, the thing you feared most began to happen. Chaos began to assault your order from all sides. Do you remember? The ghosts of your father's chaotic era, the ones you thought you had permanently banished, returned one by one. To the south, in Edom, an exiled prince named Hadad, a remnant from your father's conquests, suddenly rose up, a thorn in the soft underbelly of your empire. To the north, in Damascus, a warlord named Rezon gathered a band of renegades and became a constant, incurable pain. These external enemies were not yet the most fatal blow. The most fatal blow came from within, from your own perfect, rational system. Do you remember the young man named Jeroboam? He was once your most capable subordinate. You promoted him yourself because he was, like you, intelligent, efficient, and driven, a perfect Apollonian administrator. You put him in charge of overseeing the forced labor of the northern tribes. And he, precisely because he was in the midst of it, saw more clearly than anyone the suffering and resentment that lay beneath your magnificent temple. He saw the cracks in your perfect order. And so he, the most rational administrator you handpicked, became the leader of the rebellion against your tyranny of reason. The suppressed Dionysian rage of the northern tribes had found its champion. You tried to arrest him, but he fled to Egypt, to the very ally you had bound to yourself through marriage, the ally you thought was an unbreakable pillar of your system. You see, the complex and meticulous web of international relations you had built with your reason now, in turn, became a sanctuary for your enemies. Everything you had built was beginning to turn against you. You would sit in your vast, empty palace, and for the first time, you felt the loss of control. Your once omniscient mind, which could see through everything, was now shrouded in fog. You couldn't see solutions. You only saw problems, breeding endlessly. Your enemy was outside your system. Your enemy was inside your system. Your greatest enemy was yourself. It was your own pride, your own infallible reason that had finally led you down a dead-end road. And so, in the twilight of your reign, as your glory faded, as your kingdom teetered, as you were besieged by problems you could not solve, and a profound internal disappointment, you, the man who once knew everything, began to speak to the world of emptiness. You commanded us, your scribes, to record your words. They were no longer the confident maxims of Proverbs, teaching the world how to function. They were the weary, pained, blood-soaked confessions of an old man. The book you dictated was Ecclesiastes. You said, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity," because you, more than anyone, knew that inside the golden cage of perfect order you had built, there was nothing. You said, "For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief." This sentence was your final verdict on the divine gift you had requested in your dream at Gibeon, a gift you spent a lifetime unwrapping, only to find it was filled with shards of glass. You said, "I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind." You, the greatest builder in history, finally admitted with your own mouth that everything you had built was meaningless. Your perfect world had utterly collapsed. Your faith was a ruin. Your once radiant Apollonian heart had been extinguished. Now, all that was left was to wait for the final, inevitable end, to wait for the fuse you lit yourself to burn down to its last inch, to wait for the curtain to slowly fall. And then you died. You, Solomon, son of David, third king of Israel, The man once blessed by God with unparalleled wisdom, the man who built a golden age, died quietly after a reign of 40 years. Your weary heart, filled with contradiction and disappointment, finally stopped beating. And the order you had spent a lifetime painstakingly maintaining was immediately, upon your death, called to a final, explosive reckoning. Your son, Rehoboam, who grew up in the golden cage of your palace, who inherited your crown but none of your wisdom, ascended the throne. The northern tribes, who had been gasping for air under the weight of your taxes and labor levies, sent their representatives. Their request was humble. Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. It was a chance to heal the cracks you left behind, to win back the hearts of the people. But your son, after consulting a group of young nobles as arrogant and ignorant as himself, gave a foolish, haughty, and fatal reply. He told the people, "My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." In that one moment, your life's greatest fear became a reality. The Dionysian rage that had been suppressed in the hearts of the people for 40 long years finally erupted. The 10 northern tribes, led by the same Jeroboam, who was once your protege and then your enemy, declared their independence on the spot. Your perfect, unified Apollonian temple, the great structure you had poured your entire life's blood into building, shattered into pieces because of a single, irrational, emotional tirade. The chaos you feared most had, after your death, returned in the most brutal way imaginable to claim its victory. Solomon, your story ends here. It ends in a divided land and in endless war. But your echo has traveled across 3,000 years, and today, in our time, it is louder and more deafening than ever. I, as a ghost telling your story, am astonished to see countless shadows of you in the modern world. I see you all, striving for a perfect life. You use meticulous plans, comprehensive data, efficient KPIs, and precise algorithms, trying to build a perfect, controllable, accident-free Apollonian system for your careers, your families, even your health. I see you all, on your social media, carefully crafting your glistening personas, just as you once built that silent, perfect temple. I see you all, for the sake of career success, for the sake of rational goals, suppressing your own impulses, your exhaustion, and your true desires, just as you once turned living human beings into silent components for your grand design. Your tragedy back then is being reenacted in countless lives today, in a way that is more modern and more subtle. So please, allow me, in the persona of an advisor who accompanied you your entire life, to leave you, and all who are listening, with my final counsel. You have proven to us, with your tragic life, that life, creativity, a healthy individual, and indeed a healthy civilization, does not look like a perfect, gleaming Apollonian temple, nor does it look like a wild, indulgent Dionysian party. It looks more like walking a tightrope. At one end of the rope is order, reason, planning, and form. Without it, we fall into the abyss of chaos and achieve nothing. And at the other end is passion, intuition, chaos, and life force. Without it, the tightrope we walk, no matter how stable, is meaningless. Your tragedy was not that you chose the side of order. It was that you attempted to cut off the other end of the rope. You tried to use your genius-level reason to completely annihilate the unavoidable, and yet incredibly precious, chaos of your own human nature. We are always trying to find a single, definitive, perfect answer to life. But you, with your death and your failure, have shown us. True wisdom, perhaps, is not about finding the answer. It is about learning how to live with all these eternal contradictions, and how to, on that dangerous and beautiful tightrope within your own heart, walk on, with grace and with courage. Your story is over, and ours has just begun.